The Art of Thinking Clearly, by Rolf Dobelli. Introduction. Imagine a scene. You're in a quiet forest, just outside the city. A car pulls up, and a man steps out. He's carrying a suitcase and a gun. He places the suitcase on the hood of his car and opens it. Inside, stacked in neat rows, is $10 million in cash. He looks at you and asks, "Want to play Russian roulette? Pull the trigger just once, and all of this is yours." He shows you the revolver. He opens the cylinder to reveal 6 chambers. 5 are empty. 1 holds a single bullet. What do? $10 million. It's a number that could change everything. You could stop working, buy the house, the car, take care of your family forever. You could turn all of your dreams into your new reality. So you take the challenge. You press the cold steel of the revolver to your temple. You close your eyes and squeeze the trigger. You hear a faint click. And then, nothing. The chamber was empty. Adrenaline floods your body, but you are alive. You are alive, and you are a multi-millionaire. You take the money, and you build a new life. Years later, a journalist writes a story about the magnificent home you've built. They praise your success, your boldness, your genius. They see the outcome, the beautiful house, the fancy cars, the life of leisure, and they write a story about a winner. But they missed the real story, didn't they? They saw the one path where you succeeded, but they were blind to the 5 other paths, the ones that ended in disaster. They saw the result, but they didn't see the risk. This is the world we live in. We celebrate success, but we rarely understand the hidden forces that produce it. We are constantly making decisions, big and small, based on a mental map of the world that is full of blind spots, illusions, and traps. And that is the powerful, life-changing promise of the book we are exploring today, The Art of Thinking Clearly by Rolf Dobelli. This isn't just another book on psychology. It's a field guide to the 99 most common thinking errors that lead us astray in our daily lives, in our finances, our careers, and our relationships. The author, Rolf Dobelli, wasn't a psychologist or an academic. He was a successful novelist and entrepreneur who started to notice that he, and the brilliant people around him, were constantly making irrational decisions. So, for his own private use, he began to compile a list of these cognitive biases, these glitches in our mental software. That private list became a series of newspaper columns, and eventually, the international bestseller that has sold millions of copies and has been hailed as a modern classic. What you are about to learn is not a set of rules for how to think. Instead, it's a toolkit for recognizing how not to think. By the end of our journey today, you'll have a new lens through which to see the world. You'll understand why you overestimate your own knowledge, why you cling to bad ideas, and why you are a sucker for a good story, even when the facts don't add up. This isn't about becoming a robot. It's about becoming wiser. It's about learning to spot the invisible tripwires in your own mind, so you can step over them and start making better choices. So, let's begin our exploration into the art of thinking clearly. Book summary. To truly grasp the wisdom in Rolf Dobelli's work, we first have to accept a simple but unsettling truth. Our brains are not designed for perfect, logical, rational thought. They are survival machines, fine-tuned over hundreds of thousands of years to make quick, good enough decisions in a world that no longer exists. We are, as Dobelli puts it, hunter-gatherers in Hugo Boss suits, trying to navigate the complexities of the modern world with an ancient brain. And that mismatch is the source of almost all our thinking errors. Let's start with one of the biggest illusions we face every day: the illusion of success. We are surrounded by stories of triumph. We see rock stars on television, billionaire entrepreneurs on magazine covers, and star athletes on social media. Their success seems so visible, so possible. And so, like a young musician named Rick in the book, we pick up a guitar and start a band, dreaming of becoming the next big thing. But what we don't see is what Dobelli calls the graveyard of failed musicians. For every rock star on stage, there are 10,000 others who never made it. Their stories are never told. Their failures are invisible. This is the survivorship bias. We systematically overestimate our chances of success because the failures are silent, and the survivors are all we ever see. Think about it. Every popular author you see has 100 other writers behind them whose books never sold. And behind them are another 100 who never even found a publisher. And behind them are 1,000 more who dream of writing a book one day. But you only hear about the bestsellers. This isn't just about art. It's true for entrepreneurs, for investors, for anyone chasing a dream. The media isn't interested in the graveyards of the unsuccessful. To protect yourself from this bias, you have to do the digging yourself. You have to visit those graveyards. Remind yourself that for every triumphant story, there are countless untold stories of struggle. Success is far less likely than it appears. This leads us to a closely related error, what the author Nassim Taleb calls the swimmer's body illusion. Taleb, a friend of Dobelli's, tells a story about wanting to get in shape. He noticed that professional swimmers all had these incredible streamlined bodies. So, he decided to start training hard at his local pool, twice a week. But soon, he realized his mistake. Professional swimmers don't get those perfect bodies because they swim. It's the other way around. They are good swimmers because they were born with those physiques. Their bodies are a factor for selection, not the result of their training. We see this everywhere. We see models, advertising, cosmetics, and believe the products will make us beautiful. But the models were born beautiful. That's why they were chosen for the ads in the first place. We see that Harvard graduates are highly successful and assume Harvard must be a great school. But is it? Or does Harvard simply recruit the best and brightest students in the world, who would have been successful no matter where they went? We confuse selection factors with results. This is a self-illusion too. When we ask happy people for their secret, they might say, "You just have to see the glass half full." They don't realize that many of them were born with a cheerful disposition. They are predisposed to see the positive in everything. As some scientists have starkly put it, trying to be happier is as futile as trying to be taller. So, before you dive in, before you chase the swimmer's body or the Harvard degree or the secret to happiness, take an honest look in the mirror. Are you confusing the result with the prerequisite? Understanding this distinction is the first step toward setting realistic goals. But our minds don't just misinterpret the world, they actively invent patterns where none exist. This is the clustering illusion. Have you ever seen a face in the clouds? Or the shape of an animal in a rock formation? Of course you have. Our brains are hardwired to seek patterns and rules. And if it can't find one, it simply invents one. In 1994, a woman in Florida bit into a slice of toast and saw the face of the Virgin Mary. She stored the toast in a plastic container and later sold it on eBay for $28,000. Years earlier, a NASA spacecraft photographed a rock formation on Mars that looked uncannily like a human face. It made headlines around the world. But when a later probe took a clearer picture, the face dissolved into a plain old pile of rocks. This might seem harmless, but in the financial markets, it can be devastating. A friend of Dobelli's once believed he had discovered a pattern in the market. He told him, if you multiply the percentage change of the Dow Jones by the percentage change of the oil price, you get the move of the gold price in 2 days' time. His theory worked for a few weeks, and he started speculating with larger and larger sums, until he eventually lost all his savings. He had seen a pattern where none existed. The world is full of randomness, but our brains hate randomness. They crave order, meaning, and stories. Which brings us to one of the most powerful and dangerous biases of all, the story bias. Life is a chaotic jumble of details. Drank coffee, 2 sugars. Stepped on a thumbtack. Dreamed I kissed the neighbor. But we don't experience our lives as a random list of events. We knit these details together into a neat, coherent story. We want our lives to have a meaning, a purpose, a narrative thread. We do the same with world history. We look back and understand why the Treaty of Versailles led to World War II, or why the fall of the Berlin Wall was inevitable. But these things are not truly understandable in that way. We are simply building the meaning into them afterward. Stories are dubious. They simplify and distort reality. They filter out everything that doesn't fit. But we cannot seem to live without them. The media knows this. When a car drives off a bridge, the news doesn't focus on the structural engineering of the bridge, the fatigue of the steel, or the design flaws. No, they tell you the story of the unlucky driver. Where he was from, where he was going, what his dreams were. We are attracted to stories. We are repelled by abstract facts. E.M. Forster gave the perfect example. Which of these 2 sentences is more memorable? A. The king died, and the queen died. B. The king died, and the queen died of grief. Almost everyone remembers the second one better. Story A is a report of facts. Story B has meaning. It connects the events emotionally. Our brains are not built for information theory. They are built for stories. And this is where the danger lies. Stories give us a false sense of understanding. They make the world seem simpler, more predictable, and more just than it actually is. They can lead us to take bigger risks, to believe we understand things that are fundamentally random. So, whenever you hear a story, ask yourself, who is the sender? What are their intentions? And most importantly, what are they trying to hide? Pick the story apart. The facts that have been omitted are often more important than the ones that have been included. This tendency to look back and create a neat story leads directly to the hindsight bias, or the I told you so phenomenon. In retrospect, everything seems clear and inevitable. In 2007, economic experts were painting a rosy picture of the future. Just 12 months later, the global financial markets imploded. When asked about the crisis, those same experts could perfectly explain its causes: loose monetary policy, corrupt rating agencies, low capital requirements, and so on. In hindsight, the reasons for the crash seemed painfully obvious. But if they were so obvious, why did no one see it coming? The hindsight bias is perilous because it makes us believe we are better predictors than we actually are. It makes us arrogant about our knowledge and leads us to take too much risk. You see it in your own life. Of course, Sylvia and Chris broke up. It was always going to happen. They were just too different, or they were just too similar. Whatever the outcome, we can always construct a story that makes it seem inevitable. So, how do you fight this? Dobelli offers a powerful suggestion. Keep a journal. Write down your predictions, for your career, for the stock market, for politics. Then, from time to time, compare your predictions with what actually happened. You will be amazed at what a poor forecaster you are. It's a humbling exercise, but it's one of the best ways to get a true sense of just how unpredictable the world is. Our misunderstanding of the past and present is matched only by our overestimation of our own abilities. This is the overconfidence effect. We systematically overestimate our knowledge and our ability to predict, on a massive scale. It's not about whether a single estimate is correct, but about the difference between what we think we know and what we really know. And what's surprising is that experts suffer from this even more than laypeople. An economics professor, when asked to forecast oil prices in 5 years, will be just as wrong as a zookeeper. But the professor will offer his forecast with unwavering certitude. This isn't just about forecasts. 84% of Frenchmen believe they are above average lovers. 93% of U.S. students believe they are above average drivers. Of course, statistically, only 50% can be above average. This bias is what fuels entrepreneurial activity. Every restaurant owner hopes to create the next Michelin-starred establishment, even though statistics show that most restaurants close within 3 years. Without the overconfidence effect, far fewer people would take the risk of starting a business. So, be aware that you tend to overestimate your knowledge. Be skeptical of predictions, especially if they come from so-called experts. And in all your plans, favor the pessimistic scenario. This way, you have a chance of judging the situation somewhat realistically. This brings us to what Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's business partner, calls chauffeur knowledge. Munger tells a story about the physicist Max Planck, who, after winning the Nobel Prize, toured Germany giving the same lecture on quantum mechanics over and over. His chauffeur, who had heard the lecture countless times, eventually knew it by heart. One day, the chauffeur said, "Professor Planck, it must be boring giving the same speech every time. How about I do it for you in Munich? You can sit in the front row and wear my chauffeur's cap." Planck agreed. That evening, the chauffeur delivered a brilliant lecture on quantum mechanics. But at the end, a physics professor stood up and asked a highly technical question. The chauffeur, without missing a beat, replied, "Never would I have thought that someone from such an advanced city as Munich would ask such a simple question. My chauffeur will answer it." Munger says there are 2 types of knowledge. The first is real knowledge, from people who have put in the time and effort to truly understand a topic. The second is chauffeur knowledge, from people who have learned to put on a show. They have great hair, a confident voice, and they can reel off eloquent words as if reading from a script. But the knowledge is not their own. News anchors are the perfect example. They are actors, reading from a prompter. But we afford them a level of respect and authority they haven't earned. The same is true for many journalists, consultants, and even CEOs who possess more star quality than real substance. So how do you tell the difference? True experts recognize the limits of what they know. If they find themselves outside their circle of competence, as Warren Buffett calls it, they are not afraid to say, "I don't know." They might even say it with a certain pride. From a chauffeur, you will hear every line except this one. Now let's shift from the illusions in our own minds to the powerful, often invisible, influence that other people have on us. You're on your way to a concert. At an intersection, you see a group of people staring up at the sky. Without thinking, you look up too. Why? In the middle of the concert, someone starts to clap, and suddenly the whole room joins in. You do too. Why? The answer is social proof, sometimes called the herd instinct. We feel we are behaving correctly when we act the same as other people. The more people who follow an idea, the truer we deem that idea to be. This is, of course, absurd. If 50 million people say something foolish, it is still foolish. Social proof is the evil force behind stock market bubbles and panics. It exists in fashion, management fads, and diets. Why do we act this way? In our evolutionary past, it was a good survival strategy. Imagine you were on the Serengeti 50,000 years ago with your hunter-gatherer friends, and suddenly they all start running. What would you do? You wouldn't stand there and analyze whether that's really a lion or just something that looks like one. You'd run. Those who acted differently exited the gene pool. We are the direct heirs of those who copied the behavior of others. This pattern is so deeply rooted in us that we still use it today, even when it offers no survival advantage. Comedy shows use canned laughter to incite the audience to laugh along. The advertising industry benefits greatly from it, telling us a product is better simply because it's the most popular. So be skeptical. When you find yourself acting in unison with a large group, take a moment to step back and ask yourself if it truly makes sense. Just as we bow to the wisdom of the crowd, we also have a powerful tendency to bow to individuals in charge. This is the authority bias. The Bible tells us what happens when we disobey a great authority. We get ejected from paradise. And today's authorities? CEOs, scientists, doctors, and stock market gurus would have us believe the same thing. The problem is, their track records are often terrible. There are about 1 million trained economists on the planet, and not one of them accurately predicted the timing of the 2008 financial crisis. The psychologist Stanley Milgram demonstrated this bias most clearly in a famous experiment in 1961. Subjects were instructed to administer ever-increasing electrical shocks to a person on the other side of a pane of glass. The person was an actor, and no shocks were actually delivered, but the subjects didn't know that. As the actor wailed and writhed in pain, the subjects would want to stop. But the professor in the white lab coat would simply say, "Keep going." The experiment depends on it. The majority of people continued, with more than half going all the way to the maximum, lethal voltage, out of sheer obedience to authority. Airlines have learned about the dangers of this bias. In the old days, the captain was king. If a co-pilot suspected an error, he wouldn't dare question it. Now, airlines have instituted crew resource management, which coaches crews to openly and quickly discuss any reservations they have. In other words, they carefully deprogram the authority bias. So, whenever you are about to make a decision, think about which authority figures might be influencing your reasoning. And when you encounter one in the flesh, do your best to challenge him or her. Our deference to authority is matched by our susceptibility to charm. The liking bias is startlingly simple. The more we like someone, the more inclined we are to buy from or help that person. But what makes someone likable? Research shows we see people as pleasant if A. they are outwardly attractive, B. they are similar to us, and C. they like us. This is why advertising is full of attractive people. It's why salespeople will often mirror your gestures and language to create a sense of similarity. And it's why compliments work wonders, even if they're completely hollow. The world's most successful car salesman, Joe Girard, said his secret weapon was sending a card to his customers every single month with a simple message, "I like you." Aid agencies use this to great effect, using images of beaming children in their campaigns. You'll never see a stone-faced, wounded guerrilla fighter on their billboards, even though he also needs your support. We feel for the cute and the similar. So, if you are a consumer, always judge a product independently of who is selling it. Banish the salesperson from your mind. Pretend you don't like them. It's the only way to make a clear-headed decision. The way we value people is often irrational, and the way we value things is no different. Consider the endowment effect. We consider things to be more valuable the moment we own them. If we are selling something, we charge more for it than we ourselves would be willing to pay. Psychologist Dan Ariely demonstrated this by raffling tickets to a major basketball game to his students. He then asked the students who didn't win how much they would pay for a ticket. They estimated around $170. But the students who had won the tickets wouldn't sell them for less than an average of $2,400. The simple fact of ownership made them add zeros to the price. This is why we fill our homes with junk we no longer need. We become emotionally attached to our possessions and systematically overestimate their value. This effect is powerful. It even affects near ownership. Auction houses thrive on this. When you bid on an item until the very end, you start to feel like it's already yours. Withdrawing from the bidding is then perceived as a loss, and you're suddenly willing to pay much more than you had planned. The lesson here is profound. Don't cling to things. Consider your property as something the universe has temporarily loaned to you. Keep in mind that it can be taken away in the blink of an eye. This mental detachment will help you make more rational decisions about what to hold on to and what to let go. Now, let's venture into the tricky world of numbers, probability, and risk, an area where our intuition consistently fails us. Imagine two games of chance. In the first, you can win $10 million. The probability is 1 in 100 million. In the second, you can win $10,000. The probability is 1 in 10,000. Which do you play? Our emotions draw us to the first game. The idea of $10 million is so intoxicating that we barely register the minuscule odds. But objectively, the second game is 10 times better. This is the neglect of probability. We respond to the expected magnitude of an event, the size of the jackpot, but not to its likelihood. Our brains think dramatically, not quantitatively. This is why state lotteries are a booming business. The trend is toward ever larger jackpots, mega millions, mega billions, because they know that the bigger the prize, the less we care about the impossibly small odds. This lack of an intuitive grasp of probability leads to terrible errors in decision-making. We invest in risky startups because the potential profit makes dollar signs flash before our eyes, but we forget to investigate the slim chances of success. After a plane crash is reported in the news, we cancel our flights, even though the minuscule probability of a crash hasn't changed at all. This leads to the zero-risk bias. We crave absolute certainty. A risk reduction from 1% to 0% feels infinitely better than a reduction from 5% to 2%, even though the second option is 3 times more effective at saving lives. We have no intuitive grasp of risk, and so we distinguish poorly between different threats. Hand in hand with our misunderstanding of probability is our belief in a balancing force of the universe. This is the gambler's fallacy. In the summer of 1913, at a casino in Monte Carlo, the roulette ball landed on black 20 times in a row. Crowds gathered, betting millions on red. It had to change, they thought. But the ball landed on black again, and again, and again. It wasn't until the 27th spin that it finally landed on red. By that time, the players were bankrupt. They believed that the previous event somehow influenced the next one. But with independent events, there is no harmonizing force. A roulette ball has no memory. The same is true for a coin toss. If a coin lands on heads 3 times in a row, what's the next toss likely to be? Most people would bet on tails, believing that things must even out, but the probability is still 50-50. So, take a closer look at the world around you. Truly independent events mostly exist only in casinos and textbooks. In real life, in business, in your health, in relationships, events are often interrelated. What has happened before does have an influence on what will happen next. But for purely independent events, there is no balancing force. What goes around, comes around simply does not exist. Our struggle with numbers also extends to the very concept of average. This is the problem with averages. Suppose you are on a bus with 49 other people. At the next stop, the heaviest person in America gets on. The average weight of the passengers increases by maybe 4 or 5%. No big deal. Now, suppose the bus stops again, and Bill Gates gets on. By how much has the average wealth of the passengers increased? Far from 5%. If the other 50 people each have assets of around $54,000, adding Bill Gates with his $59 billion fortune shoots the average wealth up to over $1.15 billion. A single outlier radically alters the picture, rendering the word average completely meaningless. Nassim Taleb warns, "Don't cross a river if it is, on average, 4 feet deep. It might be inches deep for long stretches but have a 20-foot deep torrent in the middle." Dealing in averages is a risky business because they often mask the underlying distribution. In our complex world, we see this Bill Gates phenomenon in more and more areas. There is no average website. A few sites like Google and Facebook get the vast majority of visits. There is no average book sale. A few bestsellers dominate the market, while most sell very few copies. There is no average actor's salary. A handful of stars earn millions, while thousands live on the breadline. In these cases, mathematicians speak of a power law. A few extremes dominate, and the concept of average is worthless. So, if someone uses the word average, think twice. Try to understand the underlying distribution. If a single anomaly has a huge influence on the set, you should discount the term average entirely. Finally, let's look at the very act of making decisions, how we choose to act or not to act, and the hidden forces that drain our ability to choose wisely. You're at a marketing meeting. An advertising campaign has been running for 4 months and has failed to meet a single one of its goals. You are in favor of scrapping it. But the advertising manager resists, saying, "But we've invested so much money in it. If we stop now, it'll all have been for nothing." This is the sunk cost fallacy. It's the reason we continue with failing projects, stay in troubled relationships, or sit through a terrible movie just because we paid for the ticket. We have invested time, money, energy, or love, and this investment becomes a reason to carry on, even if we are dealing with a lost cause. The more we invest, the greater the sunk costs, and the stronger the urge to continue becomes. The Concorde supersonic jet is a prime example. The British and French governments knew for a long time that the business would never work, but they continued to pour in enormous sums of money, if only to save face. Abandoning the project would have been tantamount to admitting defeat. Rational decision-making requires you to forget about the costs incurred to date. No matter how much you have already invested, only your assessment of the future costs and benefits counts. But what if the decision isn't about quitting, but about acting in the first place? In a penalty shootout in soccer, the ball takes less than 0.3 seconds to reach the goal. The goalkeeper has to decide where to dive before the ball is kicked. About 1/3 of penalty kicks go to the left, 1/3 to the right, and 1/3 to the middle of the goal. Goalkeepers know this. Yet they almost always dive to the left or right. They rarely stay in the middle. Why? The simple answer is appearance. It looks more impressive and feels less embarrassing to dive to the wrong side than to freeze on the spot and watch the ball sail past. This is the action bias, the urge to look active, even if it achieves nothing. In our hunter-gatherer past, action trumped reflection. A lightning-fast reaction was essential for survival. If you saw a silhouette that looked like a saber-toothed tiger, you didn't stop to think about it, you ran. We are the descendants of these quick responders. But our world today is different. It often rewards careful reflection. Yet, inaction remains a cardinal sin. We get no medal, no statue, if we make the right decision by waiting. But if you demonstrate decisiveness and things improve even by chance, you're hailed as a hero. The flip side of this is the omission bias. This appears when both action and inaction lead to negative consequences. In these cases, we tend to prefer inaction. Its results seem less terrible. Suppose you are the head of a drug administration. You have to decide whether to approve a new drug for the terminally ill. The drug kills 20% of patients on the spot, but it saves the other 80%. What do? Most people would withhold approval. Waving through a drug that kills every 5th person feels like a worse act than failing to save the other 80%. It's an absurd decision, but it's a common one. Deliberate inaction somehow seems less grave than a comparable action. As the student movements of the 1960s put it, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. All of this deciding, acting, not acting, choosing this, choosing that, is exhausting. This brings us to decision fatigue. Willpower is like a battery. After a while, it runs out and needs to be recharged. The more decisions you make, the more depleted your willpower becomes. Psychologist Roy Baumeister demonstrated this by dividing students into two groups. The deciders had to make a long series of choices between small items. The non-deciders simply had to give their opinion on the items. Afterward, both groups had to put their hands in ice-cold water for as long as possible, a classic test of willpower. The result? The deciders pulled their hands out of the water much sooner. The intensive decision-making had drained their willpower. This is why, after a long day of comparing and choosing, you are more susceptible to impulse buys at the grocery store. It's why IKEA puts its restaurants in the middle of the store, so you can recharge your blood sugar before you tackle the candlestick section. And it affects even the most important decisions. A study of Israeli judges showed that they were far more likely to grant prisoners early release in the morning, after breakfast, or right after their lunch break. As the day wore on and their decision fatigue set in, the percentage of favorable rulings dropped from 65% to almost zero. They took the easy option, the default, and the prisoners remained in jail. So, if you have an important presentation to make to your CEO, when should you schedule it? First thing in the morning. When their mind is fresh, their blood sugar is high, and their willpower battery is fully charged. This journey through our mental blind spots might feel overwhelming. It seems our brains are a minefield of errors. But Dobelli's final message is one of profound and simple wisdom. He tells the story of the Pope asking Michelangelo the secret of his genius. How did you create the statue of David, the masterpiece of all masterpieces? Michelangelo's answer: it's simple. I removed everything that is not David. This is the guiding philosophy of the art of thinking clearly. We don't know for sure what makes us successful. We can't pinpoint exactly what makes us happy. But we know with certainty what destroys success and happiness. This realization is fundamental. Negative knowledge, what not to do, is much more potent than positive knowledge. The path to clearer thinking is not about adding more knowledge, more models, or more techniques. It is a path of subtraction. It is the via negativa, the negative path. Eliminate the thinking errors, and better thinking will follow. Focus on what is not David, chisel it away, and the masterpiece will reveal itself. Commentary. After exploring the 99 thinking errors laid out in The Art of Thinking Clearly, it's easy to feel a little discouraged. It's as if our brains are fundamentally flawed, hardwired for irrationality, and that clear thinking is a hopeless battle. But that's not the true takeaway from Rolf Dobelli's work. The real message is one of empowerment. It's not about achieving perfection, it's about gaining a crucial advantage by simply being aware of the traps that ensnare everyone else. The most powerful idea in the entire book is what Dobelli saves for the end: the concept of via negativa, or the negative path. This is the simple but profound idea that we achieve wisdom and success not by learning what to do, but by learning what to avoid. We know with far more certainty what makes for a miserable life: debt, addiction, chronic stress, toxic relationships, than what makes for a happy one. We know what sinks a business: ignoring customers, accumulating too much debt, failing to innovate, better than we know the precise formula for success. Michelangelo's genius wasn't in knowing exactly how to create David from nothing. It was in knowing what parts of the marble block were not David and needed to be chipped away. This is the essence of thinking clearly. It's not about being the smartest person in the room, it's about being the most disciplined in avoiding stupidity. The legendary investor Warren Buffett and his partner Charlie Munger built their empire on this very principle. As Buffett says, Charlie and I have not learned how to solve difficult business problems. What we have learned is to avoid them. This is a liberating thought. You don't need to have all the answers. You just need to be relentlessly good at spotting and avoiding the common pitfalls. So, how do we apply this in a practical way? You can't walk around with a checklist of 99 biases in your head for every decision. As Dobelli himself admits, that would be exhausting and impractical. Instead, he suggests a simple, two-tiered approach. First, for decisions where the consequences are small, don't overthink it. Let your intuition take over. Choosing between sparkling or still water, or what to watch on TV tonight, doesn't require a deep rational analysis. Thinking is tiring, and your mental energy is a finite resource. Don't waste it on trivialities. Second, for situations where the consequences are large, major career choices, significant financial investments, important relationship decisions, that's when you slow down. That's when you pull out your mental checklist. You don't need to remember all 99 biases, but you can build a habit of asking a few key questions. 1. Am I falling in love with a story, countering the story bias and survivorship bias? Is this decision based on a compelling narrative, or on hard, statistical facts? Am I only looking at the winners and ignoring the thousands who failed? 2. What's the opposite of my belief? Countering confirmation bias. Actively seek out disconfirming evidence. Try to prove yourself wrong. If you can't, your belief is much stronger. 3. What are the other options? Countering alternative blindness. We often frame decisions as a simple choice between A and B. But there is almost always a C, D, and E. Force yourself to consider the next best alternatives. 4. Why am I really doing this? Countering action bias and sunk cost fallacy. Am I acting just for the sake of acting, because waiting feels uncomfortable? Or am I continuing down a path simply because I've already invested so much in it? By building these simple questions into your process for big decisions, you systematically de-risk your life. You begin to operate with a clarity that few people ever achieve. You're no longer just a passenger, swept along by the currents of emotion and hidden bias. You're the pilot, with a checklist, prepared for the unexpected. The Art of Thinking Clearly is not a book about becoming a flawless, logical machine. It's a book about humility. It's about recognizing that the human mind, for all its brilliance, is a flawed instrument. But by understanding its flaws, by knowing where the blind spots are, we can compensate for them. We can learn to be our own heretic, to question our most cherished beliefs, and to find strength in knowing what we don't know. In the end, the journey to clearer thinking is the journey of chipping away everything that is not David. It is a lifelong process of reduction, of simplification, and of avoiding the foolishness that comes so naturally to us all. And in that process, we don't just become better thinkers. We become wiser, more effective, and ultimately, freer. That was our journey through The Art of Thinking Clearly by Rolf Dobelli. We've touched on some of the core ideas today, but I'll be honest with you, a summary can only take you so far. The true power of this book is in the cumulative effect of seeing these 99 biases, one after another, illustrated with simple, memorable stories. It's like getting a software update for your brain. This summary is designed to help you decide if this book is worth your time. If anything we've talked about today has resonated with you, I truly encourage you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning. It's an experience that can genuinely change the way you see yourself and the world around you. You can find a link to the book in the description below. Also, if you found this summary valuable, please take a moment to click that like button and subscribe to the channel. It lets us know we're on the right track and ensures you won't miss our next deep dive into another life-changing book. Let's keep growing together.